I've needed this so fucking bad. A Crack in Time is the de facto sequel to Tools of Destruction, technically taking place after the events of Quest for Booty. Insomniac made us wait several years for the quote-unquote resolution to the Future Saga. Little did we know they'd make an epilogue further down the line. Now this is something I played a lot when I was young. Tools of Destruction was indeed my introduction to Ratchet & Clank, but A Crack in Time soaked up a good majority of my spare time in my middle school days. Maybe my opinion is colored because of that. However, it's worth noting that while playing, I didn't really feel nostalgic. Maybe a few lines of dialogue made me feel a bit tingly and joyful, but the rest was just pleasant to experience over again. It's been so damn long since I've treaded these waters, and I'm glad to have the chance to give it another go. Is A Crack in Time as good as everyone says? As good as my child self would say? Let's drop right in with the basics. If you recall from the previous two games, Clank was abducted by the Zoni. Eventually, we find out where they took him and that Dr. Nefarious is pulling the strings. This all sets up for A Crack in Time, which opens to the beautiful and illustrious Dr. Nefarious. It turns out Dr. Nefarious tricked the Zoni in order to get them to tell him where something called the Orvis Chamber is. Now, the Zoni find out and get a bit pissed off, and all hell breaks loose. Typical. In the midst of all the chaos, Clank escapes the clutches of Dr. Nefarious. Quite unusually, you start off in control of Clank. He plays basically like he did in Tools of Destruction, except his objectives are a bit different. We'll go more in depth with that later. In the meantime, you need to escape Dr. Nefarious, aided by a robot named Sigmund. Yet it is sadly not meant to be, as Dr. Nefarious catches up with Clank. He explains that they're currently in a place called the Great Clock.
And constructed in the exact center of the universe! Give or take 50 feet.
Before learning anything more, we cut to Ratchet, who is traveling the galaxy with Quark, for some reason. I guess he finally wants to be helpful? Also, how the fuck can you fit in this damn ship? Better question, how long have they been in there together? If I were Ratchet, I probably would have killed him by now. Nevertheless, they get hit by some weird anomaly and crash land on a nearby planet. Now we can play as Ratchet, and he functions exactly the same as he always does, just without Clank. Meaning you can't glide or do any of the fancy jump-in shit. What you can do, and is a major improvement, is throw your wrench while moving. Wow. I cannot tell you how jarring it is to get used to wrench throwing in the older games. You had to be stationary, meaning you always had to stop and then throw it, and then you're stuck there until it comes back, and it's just cumbersome. But now you can move around and throw your wrench at the same time, making the wrench combat a lot more dynamic. Speaking of the wrench, it carries a lot of the abilities from Quest for Booty, like the tether and the ability to pick up items and throw them. It actually gets a lot of use, and I'm really glad they didn't just throw away the mechanic. It wouldn't be Ratchet & Clank if you couldn't make shit explode. So Crack in Time has you covered. You start off with a Constructo pistol, which functions a lot like the Combustor. Except this is one of 3 Constructo weapons, which can be modified to a laborious extent. You can change how the gun fires, how it affects the enemies, attach upgrades, and even paint it so it looks like a nice Nerf gun. I fucking love the Constructo weapons because they have a lot more longevity, not to mention a lot of personality. You can tweak them to your heart's content until you have just the right settings, and I love messing around with them once you've collected a ton of modifications. Usually they're off the beaten path and come in a shiny, totally not convenient suitcase. There's a Constructo pistol, bomb, and shotgun for your customizing needs. Other weapons like the Buzz Blades and the Groovatron make a return, along with the upgrade system, which functions exactly like it always has without the Raritanium. It's kind of strange that Raritanium is absent in A Crack in Time. I understand why it wasn't in Quest for Booty just because of its length, but A Crack in Time lends itself to this kind of customization. So why not add Raritanium again? I always liked the system, and characters even mention Raritanium in the game, so why is it missing? Ah well, it isn't really a huge deal. You still have a ton of variety in weapon choices. There aren't as many as there were in Tools of Destruction, but I like to think the quality of the weapons and the sheer versatility of the Constructo mods put it on the same level. We can also rejoice to the heavens! The fucking tornado launcher is gone, gone, gone! only to be replaced by another 6-axis weapon with an admittedly cooler name. Jesus. The spiritual successor to the fucking tornado launcher. Why? At least it's a bit more useful, as you can charge up the ball of electric death before sending it out, but it has the same problems as the tornado launcher, leaving you really vulnerable trying to control the damn shot and just ugh. Additionally, I found the Tesla spikes to just be useless. I think this is really the first weapon that I just found really pathetic. It's supposed to link up electricity between the rods and eliminate those who walk past it, but it's really underwhelming. It has a really shit ammo count, and it takes quite a while to do anything of value. Aside from those weapons though, there's a lot to love here, including Fred. We all love you, Fred. Yes, there's a really cool system when you obtain a new weapon where the Grummel Nut Shop will play a cute little animation that shows you how the gun works. It's incredibly charming and lets you know what you're getting into. Anyway, Ratchet and Quark make it to a nearby village inhabited by a race called the Fongoids, who have a way to fix Ratchet's ship. Ratchet pulls an Indiana Jones and grabs the Zoni at the end of the temple. This introduces another mechanic/collectible. After the events of the Great Clock, when everything went completely berserk, numerous Zoni went missing. They are now scattered across the galaxy on various planets. If Ratchet collects a certain number of them, he can upgrade his ship and give it more firepower, shields, or whatever else. Speaking of, Quark gets abducted by Lord Vorsalon, who works for Dr. Nefarious, and Ratchet takes to the skies. Instead of watching a cutscene go by and traveling to the next planet, you actually have an overworld hub of sorts. There are various galaxies that Ratchet can travel to and fly around in to explore the scattered planets and fight off enemy ships. Most of the Zoni, Constructo mods, and gold bolts will be found on small minigame planets, as I like to call them. Each little planet will ask you to fight off a certain number of enemies or do a simple platforming challenge. They're always fun little distractions, and getting a Zoni at the end is all the more incentive. Even though they're nice, near the end of the game I kind of burnt out on them. They always found a way to differentiate themselves, but really by the end of the game I got kind of sick of traveling to the mini planets and doing side quests around the galaxy because they all blend together. You either do random platforming in one of the 3 environments, fight off spaceships, tether an enemy ship, and then fight spaceships, or yeah, just fight spaceships. Now, I don't necessarily hate the space sections, and I really enjoyed them in the beginning. All I'm saying is that it starts to get really formulaic as time wears on. The puns. They're starting. Time to speed things up a bit. Ratchet boards Vorsalon's ship to save Quark, and he ends up doing just that. It seems that Ratchet was mistaken for some rebel called Azimuth. Deciding that an enemy of Dr. Nefarious is a friend to them, Ratchet attempts to track down Azimuth. As all this is going on, Clank has a story to his name as well. He wakes up and Sigmund informs him that Dr. Nefarious just kinda left. Sigmund explains that Clank needs to become the caretaker of the Great Clock, and they head out for the Orvis Chamber. Clank plays quite interestingly. Even though he controls the same, he doesn't command Zoni. Instead, he throws time bombs to slow time, and he has a lot more focus on puzzle solving. The main mechanic is the recording system. It allows Clank to create multiple versions of himself to press switches for him to open the door. The trick is to time each recording in such a way so that Clank can make it to the end in one of the recording slots. It never got insanely challenging, but a few of them made me scratch my head a bit, and I can appreciate that. Sigmund leads Clank to a computer room where Clank enters his own subconscious and meets Orvis, Clank's father and creator of the Great Clock. Clank now gains access to the Time Scepter, which can whack enemies like Ratchet's wrench and even fix things that are broken in the environment. I don't know about you, but that's pretty fucking cool. I've never seen a game where instead of breaking shit, you can fix shit and still get money. It's fantastic. Clank now has the ability to fix time rifts across different planets by playing a weird shooting minigame. It's kind of out of left field, but it's fun and plays a bit like an old arcade game. Other than that, you can play baseball with the scepter. Yeah. Anyways, we cut back to Ratchet, who has found Alistair Azimuth, and after a rough introduction, we learn that he's a Lombax and a friend of Ratchet's father. Ratchet gets his father's old hover boots, and we get introduced to the single best mechanic in this game, the hover boots. Oh joy, these things are fantastic. When activated, you can hover around, and if you hold the R2 button, you can boost around everywhere, and it's so much faster than the normal walking speed, and just, oh god, I love it. Just be careful not to fly off the map and die. It happens more often than you might think. You can also use the bolt switches to propel yourself in a direction and jump off arrow ramps and do the maneuver from Sonic Adventure. You know, all that good stuff. Luckily, it also gives Ratchet the ability to hover as a stand-in for Clank. It's a really massive and much needed upgrade to give the Ratchet gameplay a bit more spice, and it really does add a ton to the platforming. I'd say that because of the hover boots, A Crack in Time nails the perfect blend of combat and platforming, and I absolutely love it. I can't help but notice that the checkpoint and nanotech systems are both fixed. Thank the gods. Armor actually fucking protects you now, and the checkpoint system rarely ever takes you back ludicrously far. It might help that A Crack in Time is pretty easy. There are some challenging sections, but on medium difficulty, it's nothing worth crying over. Now, I've never tried challenge mode or hard mode, but I'd imagine you'd have a lot more to deal with over there. Since it has a difficulty setting, I'm not really going to knock the game for being too easy. Besides, the fact of the matter is that I enjoyed shooting up enemies and the easiness never really bothered me. The particle effects are somehow even more gorgeous and the sound effects even more addicting.
The data to my nav unit. Give me just a few moments.
Which leads me to the graphics and music. It's easy to say that it looks like Tools of Destruction, but there are some noticeable upgrades. Everything looks a bit more cartoony, as if the realistic textures of Tools of Destruction were redesigned but kept the same look. If I'm honest, I actually prefer it looking a bit more cartoony because it really fits the Pixar style they're going for, and A Crack in Time is where I definitely understand the comparison to Pixar movies in visual, sound, and story terms. Music-wise, my opinion remains that the songs aren't memorable but definitely do fit the areas they're placed in. I do find it odd that the Groovatron's song selection got nerfed to hell, but all the songs are new, so I won't complain about it too much. A Crack in Time pretty much blows Tools of Destruction out of the water in terms of telling a compelling narrative. As the game progresses and you travel with Azimuth, you learn about his past and what happened with the Lombaxes. You watch Ratchet bond with Azimuth and work towards getting his family back. At the same time, you travel in the footsteps of Clank, who learns about his role as caretaker and is warned about the proper use of the Great Clock. Dr. Nefarious is truly the most fitting villain to ever grace the Ratchet & Clank series. I've never played 3, but I know he's in there. I love watching him get angry and practice for soap operas and yell for Lawrence, and even when he breaks a little bit.
I don't have the capacity for love, Janice. I was cursed by a tribe of gypsy ninjas when I was a kid.
I know, Lance. I was in that tribe of gypsy ninjas.
He's so wacky and fun and fits perfectly, just like the Space Pirates fit into Tools of Destruction. Wait a minute. The Space Pirates are gone. Well, shit. Now that you mention it, Talwyn, Kronk, and Zephyr never make an appearance. Ratchet briefly mentions Talwyn at the beginning of the game, and then it's like they never even existed in the first place. I'm not sure why they were in Quest for Booty if you were just going to sideline them for the actual sequel. To be honest, I think they're an integral component of the Future Saga, and it's extremely strange to not have them there. Especially when Talwyn still needs to get her fucking resolution. Am I ever gonna get it? No? Moving on, the arena actually makes a return this time, and it's a lot more challenging. The arena in Tools of Destruction was laughably easy, but still fun and netted you a lot of bolts. In A Crack in Time, they really upped the ante and push you to your limit. It's not frustratingly evil, but you will definitely die a few times getting into the gold cups. You do get some really worthwhile rewards for your time, ranging from bolts to Zoni to Constructo mods to actual new weapons that you can't buy off of the Grumble Market. Even though it's hard, it's still as satisfying as it was in Tools of Destruction. And hey, you can play a cool arcade game based off Captain Quark titled My Blaster Runs Hot. It's a cool little Easter egg distraction, but it's also kinda hard. Of course, this wouldn't be A Crack in Time without more time-based mechanics. Ratchet can actually mess around with time in some pretty damn creative ways. On some planets, Ratchet can enter a time rift to travel back into the past. If you plant something in the past and return to the present, it actually grows and turns into a grind rail. Or if you go back and prevent a certain event from happening, you can drastically alter the present day of that particular planet. It's a really cool way to incorporate time travel into the core mechanics, and I love it. It wouldn't have hurt to include a bit more sections where you travel back in time, but hey, I enjoyed what we got. I really want to talk about how the story pans out because I think it's really compelling. I'm going to have to spoil the ending and all that jazz, so please, if you're sensitive to spoilers, click on the screen or skip to the timestamp displayed on screen. Alrighty, Ratchet and Azimuth continue to search for Clank while Clank is uncovering his father's wishes. He learns that the clock is not to be used as a time machine since the Fongoids tried doing that and it destroyed billions of galaxies in the Omniverse. Basically, don't fuck with the Great Clock. It was created to fix what the Fongoids destroyed. Once Ratchet meets up with Clank in a touching reunion, they butt heads with Azimuth, who is hell-bent on changing the past since he regrets entrusting Tachyon to Lombax technology and being the sole reason that the Lombaxes are gone. Ratchet chooses to trust Clank and doesn't want to take the risk, leading to a falling out. No time to worry about that though, because Ratchet and Clank need to take out Dr. Nefarious in a climactic final battle on the Nefarious space station modeled after his own head. Isn't it brilliant? I fucking love how egotistical he is. After dealing with Nefarious, Azimuth saves you from impending death, and we end up at the Great Clock, where Azimuth is once again denied, leading to a pretty shocking scene where Ratchet is killed and you play as Clank racing to the Great Clock before Azimuth. Once inside, Clank is conflicted about upholding his father's wishes and saving Ratchet until he remembers advice given to him that the Great Clock can travel back 6 minutes without malfunctioning. Clank goes back in time, saves Ratchet, and then we enter the real final battle with Azimuth. It's a bit tough, but if you were able to beat Dr. Nefarious, you shouldn't have too much trouble here. The Great Clock goes insane and the space-time continuum is on the verge of collapse until Azimuth recognizes his mistake and sacrifices himself to turn back time. Ratchet then leaves Clank to his father and duty as caretaker, to which Clank realizes he must stay with Ratchet until he finds his family. And that's a wrap. I thoroughly enjoyed how everything develops in the narrative. Clank finally has purpose, but ultimately refuses because of his loyalty to Ratchet, and Ratchet ends up having to turn down yet another opportunity to save his family for the greater good of the galaxy. Azimuth is a great character, and I could really feel for him even when he betrayed Ratchet, just because he's the reason that all of the Lombaxes are gone, and that regret can drive someone to the brink of madness. Ultimately, I love the moral of the story, however cheesy or overdone it may be. You really can't change all the bad stuff that happened in the past, as much as you may want to correct a mistake. We all make mistakes, no matter how big, and it's all about how we deal with the present. It's quite rare that a game has a moral that deep and a burden that large. The story is lighthearted, but also manages to feel epic and adventurous and carry with it a theme that everyone can relate to. I absolutely love this story, and it pretty much solidifies my belief that Insomniac writers could write Pixar movies. After you beat the game, you can either go back in time before the final boss or activate New Game Plus, where you get to keep all your weapons and armor and go through the game in challenge mode. If you decide to go back in time, should you decide to collect all the Zoni, you can have one final showdown with Lord Vorsalon and unlock a pretty neat extra that I'll let you find out on your own. It's very similar to the unlocks of the original games, if that's any sort of hint. There you go, a crack in time. A lot of what I said in Tools of Destruction applies to this game and then some, which is why this video ended up being a lot shorter than Tools of Destruction. Shooting enemies gave me the same satisfaction, and many of the simple platforming bits returned as they functioned in Tools of Destruction, like the gravity boots and grind rails. Unfortunately, devices like the hacking tool and the helipods are nowhere to be found, which is a shame, but it more than makes up for it with the added depth of the hover boots and the ingenious puzzles in the Clank sections. It looks better, sounds better, and tells an even better narrative. Without having played the originals, I'd say this is currently the most definitive Ratchet & Clank experience that you can have. It has the traditional platforming shooter hybrid gameplay mixed in with more fleshed out Clank sections and a complete overworld that you can fly around in to freshen things up. Sure, the Zoni collecting got a bit old after a while, and it certainly could have been a little less repetitive with the side quests, but adapting and upgrading the Tools of Destruction formula worked absolute wonders for a crack in time, and it's very easy to see why so many people think it's the best in the Future Saga, myself included. Last but not least, we need to tackle Into the Nexus, the epilogue to the Future Saga released in 2013. Until then though, if you liked the video, consider giving it a thumbs up and a favorite, as it really helps out. Follow me on Twitter if you want to hear my incessant ramblings, and finally click that subscribe button if you want to get updated on my latest reviews and other gaming content. I've been King K, and I hope you have some well-deserved fun today.
We have to find a way into the Citadel. This airship may be our ticket inside. See if you can unlock the loading platform.